everybody. Welcome to the Brain Trust Podcast. My name is Adam Vass, and I'm a tabletop game designer in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
And my name's Williams. I'm a tabletop game designer in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. Adam, what's up?
Just feeling some caffeine vibes today. I'm kind of going the opposite energy spectrum as the last episode.
Nice. Yeah, last episode we returned to form in that we shot the shit for an hour and it felt great.
Yeah.
But we're gonna try and do this weekly now because a lot of people expressed interest in our podcast.
Not sure why, but here we are. We kind of were on a weekly, and then we went back to bi-weekly, and then we went to like when we were feeling it, and now we're kind of existing in the middle somewhere. The intent
that's the best you can expect. Yeah. You, if I remember, are a 1 to 2 coffee kind of person.
Yeah, I usually only have 1 cup a day. I had 1 cup at like 11 o'clock this morning, and immediately upon finishing, received a text from my friend that I get brunch with every Tuesday, who said, "Hey, do you want to meet up for coffee before we eat?" And I go, "Yeah." And so,
yeah. What could go wrong?
I had a matcha at the coffee shop. It's not my usual move, but I think that's compound. You know how there are like tea people, or like the caffeine in tea is healthier in some way, I don't know, than coffee.
I am not sure that there is caffeine in tea, in any sort of tea.
It's definitely never felt that way.
That's like Seb got extra caffeine Coke from the store, and I was like, what is going on here? Yeah, I, on the other hand, am a kind of Gulliver's Travel situation where I have to be pinned down by hundreds of little guys, and those guys are caffeine for it to have effect on me.
Yeah, I've mostly plateaued, but today I'm kind of feeling some energy, at least right now. I did eat a lot of potatoes at lunch, so that feels like a time bomb.
Yeah, yep, that's going to hit in about half an hour, so let's get fucking started. I've actually been making a lot of hash browns recently. That's my new potato project.
Nice.
Is to figure out how to make perfect hash browns.
From a potato? Not like frozen hash browns?
No, not frozen. I just like grating potato.
Yeah.
I figured out how to grate stuff based on this one guy who does cooking on YouTube, who says it uses the least amount of muscle groups to grate. So now I do this grating technique.
Min-max.
Where I just brace the cheese grater against my body, and it has like a pocket or a little container where all the contents go. And I pull it toward me to grate and push away to reload and to grate again.
Like rowing a boat?
And that's a little tip for everybody. It's more like, imagine you are, I'm kind of just punching my arm forward. Just imagine a little punch. A little bitty punch. That's the kind of awesome shit that we talk about here on the Brain Trust podcast.
It's like in a game when...
you brought a topic.
Yeah, okay. So, I feel like the second one is more brain trusty, but the first is also very interesting. So, I don't know. Maybe we'll leave this in. I was going to be like, maybe we'll let you decide. This is pre-taped.
You decide.
This is not a live feed.
We could do this live. Would you listen to this live at like Metatopia or whatever?
I bet.
DM us.
Yeah, I bet if we did a Twitch, the usuals would come through, and it would be entertaining.
Yeah. I mean, we're just spontaneously... There's little, like, content editing that happens on this podcast. Mostly if there's a particularly interesting noise that one of us makes, or any silence while we're thinking about shit.
Yeah, the live episode would just be the same thing, but we get really easily distracted.
Yeah,
more than normal, I guess,
as a feature. Yeah, because we just have less to look at. Like, I'm basically just looking at waveforms is usually how it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, you had 2 topics, and I'm down to talk about both of them. You know, we have an hour. Let's use it.
The first is I want to talk about what characters and players do in sandbox games. When the game says, here you go, you can do anything, go anywhere effectively. Like, how do you as a game designer set that up and foster something that's still interesting and compelling to players to want to engage with and not just kind of meander. The other idea is I'm working on this card game called Candy Teeth, and I think it's going to be really interesting and cool. It's a story game, but the cards have quite a bit of information on each one. Specifically, like, each edge of the card has a word or symbol on it that you would then use to make sense of. So, like...
You know I love that.
Yeah. Like, if one of the edges says tiger, and it's like, okay, how is this person... Like, do they literally have a tiger? Is there, like, a pet tiger? Is it a Calvin and Hobbes kind of situation? Is there, like, a friend of theirs who is somehow, like, embodies, like, a tiger attitude? Like, how do you use this simple prompt in an interpretive way to generate aspects of your fiction?
Yeah, let's start talking about that one, because you and I love shit like that. That kind of Mensa selects game design commonality that, like, is how can we provide the least runway for you to get going? Like, do you know what I mean? Like, as little support as possible for you to be as expansively creative as possible, and, like, finding that sweet spot.
Yeah, I think that's a really neat thing that games can do, and I think it's a thing that I try to foster in a lot of my games. Is, like, obviously the act of designing the game, to me, is a creative process, especially when it gets into setting and art and that kind of stuff. But I want the players to feel like they're taking part in the creative process instead of potentially just kind of following my guidelines, you know?
Right.
So when I say, like, okay, now, we talked about this a few times. We had that game we pitched where it's like almost like an I Spy, like items within your reach are aspects of your character. And so this red ink vial on my desk that I paint with, like, what does that mean for my character? Like, how can I manifest this in the fiction? And then
that's kind of the Billy Bob Thornton vial of blood around your neck.
Whose blood is it?
It's Angelina Jolie's blood.
Do you think he
Did
still
you know
wears
about
it?
that?
I kind of remember you mention it.
I think he definitely still has it. I'm not sure if he wears it.
That's really fucked up. Just not conceptually, it's fine, I guess, but just like I don't know. You know when you go through a breakup and you just throw so much stuff away?
Right.
I feel like the vial of blood might be at the top of the list in terms of things that are toxic for you to keep.
It's both toxic from an emotional sense to hang on to that vial of blood if it's a particularly rough breakup, but also you require some hazmat disposal materials.
You can't just put it in the
need
trash.
A special little bag. Yeah, you have to call special collections to come get your Billy Bob blood.
But yeah, games that ask the player or the players to interpret or like assign meaning to things that might otherwise not have any as part of play have always been really fascinating to me.
I think we've talked about this before, and I've had the term like high information availability. Like, what I like to do is try and reach the critical point where you have exactly enough to get going, or even so like Guide is a great example of this, where you're working with 2 cards with 6 symbols on them put together, 3 symbols on each, and you use whatever combination of symbols to create whatever scene as challenged by the amount of, like, there's a dice, and from 1 to 6 that represents how many symbols to include is your goal. And that also is combined with basically everything is read from this dice. So if it has a 3, you need 3 symbols and 3 characters, and you need to incorporate 3 people into the scene. And that's a challenge. If you get 2 out of 3, you get points for it, whatever the currency is in that game. It's been a minute. And if you get 3 out of 3, you get extra bonus. So it both is a challenge, like this role-playing challenge concept that we both love playing towards. And I actually have you in my head pretty often when I am making, especially for the more sandboxy, challengey role-playing parts of Torque. Like, how do I make this so Adam has a lot at their fingertips to both like mold and to be challenged by, to work around? Because
right.
I think those constraints are as important as the prompts that you're giving.
I think that this conceptually is the sweet spot for me between someone saying like, okay, what happens next? And it could be anything ever. And that's too broad. Or, like, okay, you turn into the alley and someone is robbing you at knife point. What is the color of the knife handle? Like, this maybe feels like too specific, and like I'm really boxed into this robbery kind of situation. The in between is like, okay, as you turn, there's a globe, or like, what is that? Like, what am I do? I draw the globe card. I'm like, okay, shit.
Yeah,
it gives me that thrill that is a challenge, but also the kind of handhold that is the game's presence in encouraging me to make something of my own volition.
Yeah, and it's about also measuring how the player had been interacting with the game before, and whether or not this opportunity for them to provide, whatever fiction control is not jarring. So I think you have, when it's the what do you do, and you haven't been kind of engaging with this dialogue with the players, either as a game designer or as a GM, often you'll see that the literal like what do you do,
right?
There can be this moment of just the floor dropping out. And also, as you say, I have a problem with prompts that are too labyrinthine and don't like, a prompt should provide as much circumstance as it does question. So like when you're asking, like, you're in an alley at knife point, what color is the knife? The player, that really doesn't matter what they say.
Right.
They could say green or they could say silver, but it's this, it gets back to this example of GMing and just kind of trust that Dogs in the Vineyard has, where Vincent Baker writes one of these examples of GMing is that, like, you come up on this field, there's no one there, but there is a gang of outlaws hidden that you can't see who plan to ambush you. What do you do? And so it gives you enough, it trusts you to, view the story in more than one way.
Mm-hmm.
It's this thing that Brandon Leon Gambetta talked about on TikTok, which is like, metagaming is basically your most powerful tool as a player and as a game designer. Like, it is it. That's what the play really is. And yeah, giving just that trick between enough rope and enough slack. Is that the same thing?
Yes.
There's an amount of rope that is right, and there is a threshold where it's still good. But having it too tight or too loose kind of fucks up the magic trick.
Yeah, and measuring that is part of the magic alchemy behind game design.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. So with Candy Teeth, the cards have these effectively symbols, whether they're literally a picture or a single word or whatever. There's four on each. There's one on each edge of these rectangle playing cards. But then on the interior of the card, it's like bisected. So there's a more explicit scene prompt on each half, and the player who draws the card gets to choose which prompt to engage with. And those are a little bit more like, a person from your past rears their head. So you still get to decide who that is, why they're there, what they're doing, that kind of stuff. But then the symbols become ways to color that in an additional kind of guided way that allows me to retain the themes of the game without telling you to tell a particular story.
Nice. That's really cool.
And this is a thing we talk about often too, of just like the choice of words that's in play is game design in like a really important way. The way that you define your character skills, like how, if it's attack or if it's strength, those could.
Yeah, when you say, I find that for me, it's like when I say action versus move versus activity.
Yeah, they have gamer baggage, but they also just have like societal baggage. Like an activity is almost inherently something that you do that is not a plight. Like activities are hobbies or recreation, or
you're not visiting something upon someone.
And an action, I think, is generally the attempt to overcome an obstacle. Like it is more strictly strife based.
Yeah.
But you could use those words interchangeably in the way that you write and design. But because of that baggage and because of the context that you're creating in your entire game's text, it will affect how players interpret it. And I think we both really like, one, choosing those words extremely deliberately, sometimes to a fault. I think sometimes you and I both like to nitpick those.
Campfire is a great example of how deep we went on each thing. And like we talked about all these actions you could do with the coin, which represents your fictional power in the story some way or another. Having a coin in a hand versus in front of you versus paying versus taxing versus auctioning. Like if we don't do it, someone else might, I think was our energy. We don't want someone who is newer to games to bring in something that we didn't think about, like what an auction represents, that one person wins and another loses, instead of what we want it to be, which is everyone is collaborating for this final item.
Right. Even kind of the distinction between giving someone a coin and paying a coin is like paying implies kind of the exchange, like you're getting something in return, and a giving is more an altruistic action. It's important.
And probably 70% of people aren't going to think about it, but that 30% is going to help them somehow. And if we're subliminally communicating the game design through the only things that someone might see of this game.
Right. But in addition to that, there's also just like when we refer to the coin sides as like, what did we end up with? Light and shadow? Like, those terms are there to evoke theme and to keep you on message instead of necessarily to foster a particular way of acting. It's just to remind you, like, hey, we're playing a horror game. Hey, this is supposed to be like spooky stories kind of vibe. So I really like having that kind of stuff present too. Like in Ether operations, I refer a lot to like the realms as characteristics of the of the player characters, because just using that word has baggage of like exploration and like a large tumultuous kind of area, and it's just me reminding you that like as you're in this scene, as small as it might be, like you are a facet of this really large like encompassing geography. And I think language both curates how players will treat the tools that you give them, but also gives you the opportunity to invisibly set up a fence line, or set up like a kind of like chalk outline around what you deem to be appropriate, because they can always go outside of that, but to some extent you're trying to curate a really good time within those boundaries.
And like to stay on theme as possible.
Yeah.
Like you kind of build the fence, or the knee-high fence around which this game is, because it doesn't matter what we do. Someone might do something else with it, but it reminds me that in Black Mass, the characters don't have like a hurt thing. They have a struggle, which is just like using their body. And it frames that like they're not here for violence, but violence might happen to them, and this is what you use. And that's like where kind of just where I started thinking of the verbs for the game. We're talking in particular about games that use prompts, but even going as elementally as stats or what you call individual turns in a round means stuff here at this point.
Yeah. I think too we focus a lot on it's interesting because I think so much of the pedantic word choice stuff that we do is in story gaming, because I think by virtue of presenting this as like a narrative thing, the words that you're using are inherently more important, almost like, because stories are told with language. But trad games are still stories being told with language. It's just a little bit, the structure is different. So that mentality is still present. That game designer vocabulary curation is still really important in how it affects player behavior. Is there something we can do with? I feel like we've tapped that vein a few times and come up with cool things. Like one time we designed a thing where it was like a 3-player game and 2 players were GMs of like purple and orange. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
What does that mean? Like a player has to do something purple. It's definitely stuff we've had cool successes and great like brain blasts with. But I don't know if I have anything currently. I mean, because it's a thing that I use so frequently that
it's funny. Like our last thing that we made on the podcast was Archives of Alexandria.
Oh yeah,
and that is it's like using this, but it's the complete absence of this. Like there is one word you can't use.
Yeah,
you can use everything other than this.
I think the importance of the language choice is a constant theme, and I think that was like a cool, accidentally subversive way of approaching the thing that we like to approach so often. And it worked really well in that similar way of like the words that you choose to describe this are important, but that is what the actual gameplay is. So less on us as designers.
Yeah, honestly, I think we saw. Yeah, we've got games about this.
Like if you are interested in pursuing the concept further, A Guide to Casting Phantoms in the Revolution is a fantastic execution of this. This is really how Necronautilus setting building works, which I was very inspired by the game Downfall, which has you kind of using single words to define aspects of your culture before you watch it crumble. And that to me was really interesting, of just like saying that we live in a like tower culture, and then we as players go around trying to flesh that out. Questlandia and Noirlandia do this really well too.
Yeah.
You got any examples you want to shout?
I would have said like Guide for Shore is just like the full extension of this. Campfire is explicitly authored prompts, so the goal here is to make someone's voice be really present while still mutable and accessible to all the players to do whatever they want. Accessible in that you can access it. As far as games that I like that do this, let me think. Reading tarot, like the most. I have a game that's kind of uses elements of this. It's called Drawing Dead, or Drawing Death in Lucian Kahn's Hibernation Games anthology, and it has a bunch of you are the employee of death who goes through all of these bounced cases of death and investigates them and tries to figure out how these people avoided death and to render judgment upon them, because death is super busy reaping the souls of the world. And so you're kind of the fixer. And in this game, you are dealing cards to phantom hands that represent this cabal that made a pact to avoid death in some way. And you're slowly revealing and learning their cards through play and establishing what each card means. But you have an incomplete ledger because the person before you suddenly quit. So part of the game is discovering why this job opening happened, what the larger conspiracy is happening here, and putting together the old ledger with new stuff that you learned. So instead of having a prompt for every single card, there are like 6 prompts that are just kind of spread through the book that you apply to cards, and it shows you how this person had read cards, and it inspires you to make your own. So that's kind of a deconstruction of this like high information shit.
Yeah.
It's purposefully missing pieces, and it's messy, and it makes you make strong choices, but shows you how specific and strange some of the choices were. Yeah, I definitely want to do more with that idea, and maybe freaking next year some Necronautilus shit. But hey, that's what I'm into there. I'm trying to think of games that I like that aren't just like interpreting paintings. Like, I think I mostly get this from every other piece of my life and not game design. Right? That like I like so much just that interpretive bit, the generative stuff from like different musical backgrounds. Like chance art I love it. Jerry's Map is a great example. I mean, this is just a huge topic that I don't know.
I mean, I think even what we were talking about before recording of like Videodrome having these implications that exist outside of the story that's being told. Like the director, the filmmaker deliberately sprinkles these interesting things without diving deeply into them. And it's not out of negligence. It's to get you thinking about those things. And like, that's awesome. And that's cool.
It makes you press select and see that you've only seen a certain part of the map, and there's much more that is at the corners. And
it also, I think, enhances the story that is being told because it assigns an importance to it. You know, like, look at all these things that are interesting. Wouldn't you like to know all of them? Let's really focus on this one. And I'm like, okay, let's focus on this one. Like, it must be compelling because you're showing me all this cool shit, and this is the one you're choosing. So I trust you. And
I'm kind of so glad that David Cronenberg didn't have ridiculous budgets and movie deals, that there was only one Videodrome movie and there's only one The Fly.
Yeah.
And like, how shitty those would have been if there were
as
if that was
franchises.
spread out over 3 movies. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The MCU. My name is the New Flesh, and I'm here to show you how to exercise. Step away from the screen.
Jeff Goldblum is like at the press conference. He's like, I am the Fly, and all his skin comes off. He's a gross little bug man. I think we could just,
spend half an hour on the David Cronenberg cinematic universe.
I mean, we could do it.
No, we should absolutely not engage with it any further. Let's take a quick break.
Yeah, we'll talk about sandboxes. I heard crickets, and that was nice. I was like,
I don't know what it is.
Kind of had the feeling that you were in Nightland or something, and I was like,
there's just a lot of grasshoppers around here recently. I saw a massive one on my car this week, like the size of my index finger.
That's fucked up.
I did not appreciate it.
That's a threat.
It was like on the top of my car, right next to like the driver's side door, and I didn't notice till I opened the door. And my reaction was just to slam the door with my foot and take a few steps back so it didn't jump towards me.
Oh my god, I'm getting chills. It's like when you see a small praying mantis and you're like, nice, that's really cute. And you see a praying mantis of any other size and you're like, get the fuck away from me.
You're not supposed to be on this planet.
Yeah, you are Brack from Space Ghost. Like, please get the fuck out of here. We have fruit flies right now.
Yeah.
And something I've realized is that flies in a movie, yes, I like this. Flies in my bathroom, no.
I will fight every single one of them.
Why do you like it? I just don't know what to do. I've like sprayed water at them, and Seb says they like water, so I'm helping them. It's like fun.
Have you made
for
the
them.
Trap? I have a fruit fly trap out that's slaying. Literally.
Seb made a fruit fly trap and it's not working. I don't want to say, I don't know how to do it, so I'm not like, obviously this trap doesn't work. I have no fucking idea. I don't have a little fly mind, so I don't know what they like.
My tactic is a little bit of dish soap, some apple cider vinegar, and then fill it up with water so it's foamy, and then I put that either near the sink or near the trash can, wherever they seem to be more active. So they go in for the sweet vinegar, and then they get caught in the soap bubbles, and something with the density, they all drown.
Okay, this is like really close to what Seb did, but Seb has a little bit more kind of a jigsaw approach.
It's
to
the
this
saran wrap with the holes punched in it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, so you've got a cup, and it has saran wrap with holes punched on the top, and it's filled with apple cider vinegar. And they were explaining to this to me very calmly as I was thinking, like, you're a trained practice killer. This is... It reminds me of my days when I executed a campaign against stink bugs in Maryland. I don't know if you have stink bugs.
We do, yeah, and it was a big problem here a couple of years ago.
I became basically a world-renowned war criminal against stink bugs. Basically developing new kill techniques, and I was tried at The Hague, and it's all on Wikipedia. Yopes versus stink bug. But yeah, so the fly lands on the saran wrap and crawls through the hole and gets in the apple cider vinegar because it likes that kind of stuff. The fly I likes playing piano and having sex with women. It is Jeff Goldblum. And they get their fill. They get their beaks wet. Their proboscises moist. And then they try and fly out. But the ceiling, like to our ancestors, Adam, is simply a sheet with holes poked through. And they can't fly out. And so they're stuck. It's not working. We've had them out for a couple days, so maybe we'll try your kind of chemical method.
I recommend it. The dish soap is the key, I think, because I've done the saran wrap thing, and I think they just find a way. Life finds a way.
Finds a way.
To mix our metaphors here. Let's talk about some.
So you got the Blu-ray?
I got the Videodrome Criterion Collection.
Is it good?
I'm sure. I left it on the table. I know that I wouldn't be able to finish the show if I engaged with it.
Oh, that's smart.
But now it's a reward for once we do finish the show.
Look at my new Blu-ray.
I might watch it again today. I was going to do some drawing after this, and I usually will throw movies on while I do illustration. And that seems like a good... I feel like it won't count towards my goal of watching 150 movies this year. To rewatch a movie I saw last week, I feel like maybe I shouldn't count that.
It was so funny watching The Green Knight because we could only rent it for 3 days because we're not going to theaters.
Right. And
I was like, oh, we have it for 3 days. Does that mean I could probably watch it every day after we watch it? Of those 3 days, or is it over? And did not even check once I was done.
Yeah,
the first time. Did not even check my ability to watch The Green Knight again.
That reminds me, I was just going to say that there's this movie called Mandibles that's been on my list about a giant fly.
Ooh.
It's supposed to be like a comedy, like not a horror movie. It's from the director of Rubber, the movie about a car tire that kills people.
I haven't seen Rubber. I really want to watch it. I think I would like it.
The same director made Deerskin, which I watched this weekend, and I just had such a good time. It was so fun.
Nice.
But I was just thinking, I wonder if we could, like, if I rented a movie, if I could stream it in our Discord and, like, have a Brain Trust movie night. Is that a thing?
Oh, that would be fun. I know I am a part of Trevor Henderson's Discord, and he has figured out a way to do this.
Cool.
By having like a private screening room kind of thing. But I think you have to have the files on your... The files have to be in the computer, simply. Yeah, the files are in the computer. And then you do something like that. But I would love that. That would be super fun.
Yeah, I'll look into that. Anyway, let's get back into some gaming. I want to talk a little bit about sandbox games and what you do. What the hell do you do?
What the freaking hell?
Because here's a game in obvious. I think Dungeons and Dragons is the most obvious one. I would actually say that Dungeons and Dragons maybe didn't start off as a sandbox and kind of became one out of player habit. Would you agree? Because I think it was a tactical thing and a dungeon delving game, but it became a sandbox game through play.
It's hard to know if D&D is a sandbox game.
Yeah,
I think that because both styles, the railroad, the player driven versus GM driven, which is like it's kind of the politically correct way to talk about it. That it depends so much and what different play cultures have, because D&D is just a cipher for different groups to have different experiences with. Like, in the 80s, I don't know how many people were trying to play Critical Role style high production games versus fucking the Chick Tracks kind of demon summoning shit. But it really does lend itself to open-ended stuff. Like, you're given a toolkit. Each character is a toolkit, and you apply that toolkit to situations. So
right. And I think some of the other kind of tent poles, thinking of like Cyberpunk 2020, you do runs, like the pretense is you're a runner doing runs. Or maybe that's Netrunner. I don't fucking whatever. Like a lot of, or Blades in the Dark, like the pretense is you're doing heists, right? There's generally here's the world that you're inhabiting. You can be a kind of any kind of character, but its play is focused around a particular thing. Then you have games like Forbidden Lands or Mutant Year Zero or Cyber Metal 2012 or Troika or a lot of these sort of more modern, like, new wave OSR things. That's just like, this world is really cool. There's so much shit to do in it. And here's your character. And it's sort of expecting and in some ways subtly encouraging a particular direction of play, but not always. And that's interesting to me conceptually, but I also am always fearful of, like, getting a book and understanding the rules of it and then going, okay, well, what am I supposed to do with this?
What's next? Yeah. How does this interact with me hanging out with my friends?
Right.
I've been thinking about this a ton because ultimately Torque is a sandbox game, and I have been just tightening all of the procedures and tools for the sandbox elements, and that is a different story because it's a GM-less sandbox game. So how do I give everyone the tools and the ability to make up enough content to have it be a perpetual motion machine? Like,
yes.
How do I make one person pulling a Newton ball affect someone else's scene and just slap their Newton ball and they can grab two and shoot it right back? You know what I mean?
Yes. So in Cyber Metal, my approach to this has been to have individual goals kind of assigned or chosen in some way, of saying, if you're a vermin character, like, you need to collect items for your horde, and
nice.
That's giving you a goal that the other players don't necessarily need to even know about, but it will drive story. Because if you need help, they're gonna go with you, but they have their own shit that they need to do too. So, like, maybe, you know, it's a scratch my back and I'll scratch yours kind of situation, or maybe it's a if we both are going to this location, why don't we go together? And then, like, obviously something fucked up might happen to our collective along the way that then impedes our individual goals. And I think that's interesting to me metaphorically too, because I think that's just kind of like life, you know? It's like life did, you know? Like, well,
but it's like you get situations and then you come up with plans to solve the situations.
Right. And sometimes the situations are, I want to throw a party tonight. And sometimes the situations are, this motherfucker is going to steal all the water in the whole city. And so there's like an interesting play of scale too. Because, like, this motherfucker might steal all the water and we had a party scheduled tonight. Like, now you have infinite ways of approaching multiple problems that sort of feed one another in interesting ways too. Hopefully.
Yeah, Unknown Armies 3rd edition does an interesting thing because it assumes you're a cabal of weirdos doing stuff in a town or city or community that has different scales of impact. And they're all measured by this one tool that, I forget what they call it, but it's a thermometer that you fill up, and every time you do something that advances that goal, you add a little bit to the thermometer. And when you're ready to tackle the goal, I think the one they use in the book is like getting someone who you like elected mayor. When you do enough things that fills that thermometer up, you do one roll, which is like a project roll, and see if it's successful, rolling under the amount that you filled it up. So let's say it's 100, cool. You filled up to 88, you try and roll D100 under that 88, which is, it's a flattening of everything in this game. So it could make becoming a god be the same kind of game impact as electing a mayor. what's the difference really between being a god and being the mayor? But it is something like that adds a you can do anything sticker to the game that is pretty interesting, and it sounds like that's what cyber metal, kind of the spirit of it.
Yeah, I think having that level of significance be explicit might be valuable in the design of saying, like, your gang are bottom feeders, like you're level 1, so all you can really engage with, like, this fucker who steals all the water, they might still do that, but you're not even, like, on the level to approach them. So this, in that same, like, mayoral versus god kind of level, like, you can't, if you haven't even elected the mayor, you're probably not even going to touch the gods, you know? Like, you kind of got to stay in your lane to some extent.
If you're, and you can kind of create this self-propulsive narrative that's like, okay, to get to the place where I can save the city getting water, I first have to figure out what's going on, or maybe solve this problem locally, and then, like, build up, and every time I succeed, I raise, like, a kind of narrative rank in this community where I'm more important and more people recognize me. And the closer I get to being able to get this water supply back, or stop, whatever kind of tank girl shit is going on here, I'm a bigger target in general. So the stakes are rising with your ability to solve the larger issues in the scenario, which is really, really cool. I like that.
I think, too, I do like that, especially as, like, a long-term play focus. But I also might just say, like, you as a collective can decide to downgrade your status voluntarily at any point.
Yeah.
Because, like, maybe it's not your goal to get a mayor elected. Maybe you really don't give a shit and you just want to throw ripping parties, and, like, that should
that
be an
itself
option
is a
too.
pretty, it's an interesting, like, you can pay your rank to better your own life or community in some way, and then you go back to that level. It's like fucking, there's that person in small towns when someone's like, oh, that's the mayor, and it's just someone who is just really gregarious and, like, a character in the town.
Yeah.
Like, loves everybody, unofficial mayor, and that's someone who probably did something and just kind of removed themselves off of the pressure map and just became a local fixture. So, like, it seems like a cool bankable thing.
Yeah, I like that. Because I think that plays well with the faction system that exists already. Like, basically treating the player character group as a faction, which was already in play. But I didn't quite know how to dictate that, like, just because you and the military are both factions doesn't mean you're equals or peers.
Right.
And I think having maybe a numerical value or, like, a power level assigned to factions, because that also gives the NPC factions an additional quality that helps you understand them as players. Like, seeing a faction is level 5 or something, like, you know more information very quickly.
And you can more obviously tell the connections they have with anything. It is a cyberpunk game, and it is, like, cool low-tech stuff. So what if the faction map was just a stylized motherboard, and the larger chips are these big aspects, like the devil and the military, and you can see their connections to everything, but you are just this little, I don't know anything about motherboards, but a little silvery part. Yeah. And you can just visually tell that, like, oh, I'm in this kind of group with a street gang and these group of lawyers who are irritating and this, like, local punk rock band. And, the higher that I get, I can see the path that I would take to get closer to this level of clout that the military has, or I can just divest my own points into the other people in my zone and kind of bring all of us up together.
Yeah, I dig that. Yeah, that's cool. Because I also think... Remember playing Fallout and just being like seeing a Deathclaw for the first time? And you're like,
yeah.
Oh, I fought this mosquito already, so like what's this motherfucker? And then it just wipes you immediately and there's zero chance. I think there's something...
It puts its claw through your body.
It's valuable information to learn, though. Like,
yeah,
the moment feels shocking, but I really like it. And then by the end of the game, you're just wiping Deathclaws like it doesn't really matter. Because at first, in my head, I was like, I only want factions to be interacting with factions on the same level. But I do kind of like the gamifying that... It's interesting, because, like, Sandbox, you can do anything, and you should do anything. But sometimes the game is like, you can do this. It's not smart.
But...
And
yeah, it's the kind of like Here Be Dragons shit.
Right. Then you learn your lesson. It changes the way you act. It gives you some sort of like long-term interest or even just a short-term obstacle. And both of those feel valuable. So I like the idea that factions have this interplay regardless of status or size or whatever stature quality. And how that can also curate your play experience to be like, you know, are you then, from that experience, do you say, like, I'm not going anywhere near the Deathclaws? Or do you go, I'm going to boost myself up because I'm going to show the Deathclaw who's boss? It's just going to take me a while.
I've been drinking green tea all day. This is the only thing I can think about. I'm going to fuck up this Deathclaw. Yeah, it's... really, the faction system you've outlined is a great solution to, like, how do I make sandbox play make sense and not a big cognitive load for a GM. Like, you're not... The player saying, like, I want to go do this thing doesn't force the GM to scramble for it. It just neatly fits into the larger themes of the game that you, the designer, has set up and given the GM and the players the tools to interact with that.
I think it's compelling too to say, like, this game is about all the citizens of Pentagram City. And citizen generally, I feel like, has an individualistic connotation. So, because you as player characters effectively are individuals with your own shit to deal with. But you, by virtue of playing a game and, like, making it kind of cohesive and intuitive, work together. So here are these like faction level or community level shared things to engage with while you're simultaneously engaging with your individual pursuits. And I feel like that makes it feel really lived in and, air quotes, realistic. Like,
right.
Like if you need to find acid tabs and I have a buddy that I went to school with who's a drug dealer, like, I can make that connection for you, but we're going to have to go out into the city to get there, and that presents its own challenges because the city is a city, and you otherwise on your individual quest to find acid tabs probably would have a really rough time. You can't just go up to somebody on the sidewalk and ask them. So I think that fosters the kind of gameplay that I'm after, which is community focused individuality, if that is not a paradox.
No, I totally know what you mean. It's really reminding me of a movie I watched recently called Stray Dog by Akira Kurosawa. And the whole concept of the movie is that there's this new cop. It's the 50s, by the way. There's this new cop, and his gun gets stolen. And he is in huge fucking trouble. And he has to go all over searching every lead he can find to get his gun back because he's terrified of the violence that this gun could be ultimately he would be responsible for in his mind. And it leads him to basically suss and discover the gun running rings that existed in Japan and in his journey, and find the people, everyone who the gun touched hands with. It's like this object-driven story that really shows a system filled with people living and doing shit. And it was a really captivating movie in general, but it's, yeah, I like that. That reminds me of the system that you're outlining here, and it might be worth checking out.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm not going to write when we hang up, but I'm seeing some of the cogs turning, and that feels good.
That's great. We turn cogs here on the Brain Trust podcast, and why don't you turn our cogs a little bit? That sounds a little leery, doesn't it?
It's not a euphemism, we swear. It's just
bunch of clockheads over here at the Brain Trust podcast. Do you wear a watch? I'm trying to remember your wrists.
I do.
Right now. Are you a watch person?
Yeah, I have like a $10
watch.
Plastic black watch.
I like that. That's great. I would say you either didn't wear a watch or you wore a slightly fancy watch. So that's cool.
I'm not a smartwatch person, and it's like sunglasses. Like, I've proven to myself now by having a cheap watch for years that I could have had a nice watch, but it worked out okay. Like, I saved the money, I guess.
Yeah, you're disproving the boot theory that you need to buy expensive boots to offset the cost of buying cheap boots and then fucking up. Great. Well, if people want to fund your next watch or sunglasses, where can they find you?
Pentagram.city is the URL for Cybermetal 2012.
Yes.
Coming soonish. I still haven't cemented. I'm still afraid of committing to the launch time. Oh no, that's another one, huh? Fuck.
Oh no, don't worry.
I haven't committed yet to a concrete launch date because I just want to make sure I have all my ducks in a row. Is that what the phrase is?
Yeah.
I want to make sure I have all of my vermin in the horde. And but I'm very excited, and there's so much cool stuff going on with that project. Additional books and merch, and I'm really going all out. So pentagram.city for Cybermetal 2012, and worldchamp.io for everything else, including Candy Teeth, which I think is going to come out this month. And I'm on Twitter at WC Gameco, where I will be reminding you of the former things.
Hell yeah. And just like as a reminder to everybody, making a game right now is really hard.
Oh,
just
true.
like getting a game printed, and like just even the supply chain shit is so fucked. So you pre-save that Cybermetal link, pentagram.city, and hit it the fuck up when it goes live, and not before it goes live, you know? I'm Will. I've been your co-host. It's been a really great time. You can find me at will.com. I am online at will_JOBST. I am locking down a printer for the Black Mass reprint that will come with a playmat, and we'll have the cards and everything like that. So check out for the pre-order link. That will be coming soon. Torque is great. Yeah, there'll be an update on Kickstarter if you just want to see any of the game design stuff. But this is a good-ass game. And finally, we just get Campfire stuff all the time now because we've scheduled our production schedule to give us the most dopamine over the longest amount of time.
It's working.
Yeah. So we just got the coins. They look really good. Someone on Twitter asked if they could buy the coins standalone. You can't, but you can pre-order it at braintrust.rocks. So go ahead and grab it. It's going to be the horror game of the decade, honestly. It's really good.
It
is. What else? There's a Discord. It's popping off on the daily. It's a cool place. There'll be a link in the show notes. Check it out. But if that's all, brain emoji, handshake emoji.